G'day, everybody. Alan Endres here, founder of ZuCoins and ZuCas. Today is the 30th of September, and it is ZuTime. This is the time where my time is your time. So let's spend that time together and cover off on some very interesting points today, which is more in line with the strategy moving forward for ZuCoins in our marketing and advertising world. How are we going to get the world to understand about ZuCoins, get the world to adopt ZuCoins, and get that mass adoption that we talked about in earlier episodes. Sorry for being a few minutes late today, but that old saying, when you got to go, you got to go. So there you go. I did go, and I'm now here with you guys. So welcome aboard, everybody. Now let's get straight into this one. Marketing and advertising. It's one of my pet hobbies. And today I thought I'd share a few inner secrets about the thinking processes that we've had with marketing for over 20 years, some of the testing that we do, the way we go about it, the research we do on other products and companies, and what I really enjoy, which is a real buzz, is to put in play some of that research and actually put it into the marketplace to see the reactions in various social media forums and how that affects our bottom line. Because at the end of the day, the structures that we're putting in place, we're just one opportunity, as we have said in the past, to get the word out about ZuCoins and, of course, what that means for all of us in the long term and how that'll take care of itself in terms of value. Now, we keep getting people questioning about where we're up to with things. And let me just reaffirm what was stated yesterday. And if you take the time to listen to these live updates, that's why my time is your time. So you know as much as I do. There are 20 odd wallets out there. They're going very well. And those processes are continuing to the end of next week. So do not expect any more updates in that regard, whilst those people are attending to the live wallet environments and give your fellow ZuCoin holders the opportunity to make it easier for when you come in and get involved. And then you've got no reasons whatsoever or any expectations other than you'll be successful in being able to receive your SMS, download and install your wallet, and put that wonderful, elusive little icon on your home pages, because it's what's called a progressive web app. So that's the motivation there. And the rest of the functionalities, we're finding everybody is having no issues in terms of realizing what to do, the send and so forth. And the last exercise will be data protection, for that obvious reason that we spend a lot of time and money on. So how do we tell everybody in the world that we're going to talk about, we're going to get people involved with and be part and parcel of our strategies on ZuCoins? Now, as I've said in the past, one of the great things that you can do is learn from others' mistakes or others' lessons, and extract that information, go back and do your research and homework. And it's an ongoing thing. You know, this doesn't stop. That takes up a fair bit of my time. You know, when you're looking at that part of the program, you've got to understand the thinking and logic behind the things that we do, or I do, with the team in terms of marketing advertising. Now, the creation of ZuCas is its own platform, which is being deliberately designed to attack the giants in the industry and who had the control and the power of receiving billions of dollars in marketing dollars from merchants, particularly, that basically are just trying to send the message out about their products. Now, ZuCoin is no different to the very merchants that we have worked with. We have had pilots and launches and testing of all of the augmented reality and the geo mapping. In terms of that strategy, ZuCoins is just another product line or strategy that we're going to push out through the very platform that we say is going to attack those majors in this advertising space. So when you look at that, well, how do you do that? And how do you conquer those areas that are so powerful in relation to either the social media content and the advertising dollars globally, And how do you fit yourself into that environment? Well, Zukaz as a business model, and we've talked about this with the vouchers, is a standalone that is that connection and that bridge that allows that to happen. Where the bottom line of the deal is that instead of the advertising dollars going to Google and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and all those Twitter and those organizations, that's their lifeline. That's how these companies survive. They need the dollars and they need the data in which to push out to the consumers, and hopefully something happens. Now, in Australia, that's a $10 billion industry just with Google alone. Why do I say that? Because the ACCC says that. Now, probably not many of you have taken the time since the latest report, which was issued. And that report from the ACCC, you can go online and grab hold of it. It's a wonderful read. I'm going to have a few things out of that to share with you, because it comes back to the psychology of the way in which we're going to operate for the ZuCoin marketing side. And that report was August 2021. And that's a major report, which is all about primarily Google and the domination and the control that it has in relation to this advertising space. And what's interesting and intriguing in that report, really, and there's a lot of wonderful statistics, but certainly it's the way the ACCC has analysed competitors in that space, which filters through from your Facebooks to your Twitters and so on. And Google is the standout. Now, I'll talk about those percentages and what it does and how it achieves that. But certainly it puts to one side the why you would bother with things like Twitter or Telegram or any of those platforms. They're more chatterbox and getting people excited areas, but they're not delivering the outcomes that are needed if you're in business. If you're in business to promote a product consumer, then Google certainly is the dominating force in that space. Now, I'll talk a bit more about that in the ACCC report. It's a 202-page document, well worth reading every page, but no doubt most people will glance at the pages 1 and 2 and just get an overview and not bother with looking at the in-depth. But the in-depth is crucial to our business model and crucial on a global scale as to how we are going to put that in play with giving the world and making the world sit up and take notice of ZuCoins, which affects you. At the end of the day, we're just here in a position that the coins I have, the coins you have, is all about uptake. Uptake means demand. Demand means database for consumers, merchant database. It's very simple. If you achieve those outcomes, then again, I can't reinforce it again more enough, but the old formula kicks in, MV equals PT, and that means you're hunting down the value proposition of Bitcoin, which is at 42,000 US dollars a coin, because Bitcoin doesn't have the flavors in terms of the extensive traction from the velocity of transactions that could be put in play or the number of participants that can be onboarded, because it has a big problem of scalability. And as I alluded into my update yesterday in relation to crypto versus, the position that's been taken by the central banks with their digital currencies, this is a wonderful space to put in play mass adoption as a result of the advertising and marketing. Now, one of the things about marketing and advertising is you've got to step back. If you're in the business and you're a startup or even the big gun companies that are out there, there's a couple of areas on the old P&L that really affect the way in which you need capital, or the way in which you can either A, go out and get billions of dollars in capital through an IPO and see where those resources are dedicated to, or B, look for strategies that minimize the impact that on the P&L, which gives you far more greater flexibility in putting it into what we see as important as a small business, and that is the IT development. That's the crucial part. Now, it's all right for Google. I mean, Google started out somewhere, and it's a great book to see and to read the beginnings of Google, because a lot of those strategies at the very beginning are strategies that we're putting in play and have put in play for a couple of years as we release and build where we want to be with Zukaz. But the interesting thing is that when you look at these companies, you've got to look at that cost exercise. Now, the biggest cost that they all have is hosting costs. That is, it's one thing to say, wow, I've got a merchant, he's going to advertise some shoes, and that's going to penetrate the shoe market. The consumers are excited. They're going to come on board, and the merchant will get some sales of shoes. But in order to achieve that outcome, these aggregators of data, let's focus on Google, and Google has a number of layers of which it can spread that message, through search engines and through advertising and so on. And the ACCC report highlights that, and I'll highlight that more in a minute. But if you look at that, hosting is a big cost because somebody has to store this data. And of course, the big guns need serious dollars either coming through in revenue or money that is come from capital. And that's the only two lines that they can bring that money in. They either create massive market valuation cap values of their business on prospective database growth, which leads to more advertising, and hopefully it catches up. Now, and certainly in Facebook, that's happened, but there was a 10 or 15-year lag time there between the glory days of getting people on versus how to make a few bucks on advertising. And that's the biggest problem because they've got to host this stuff. Now, come back to ZuCoins and come back to the technology and data fragmentation. One of the advantages that we have is that we don't need to worry about storing the data. We've got the bits that we need, but the bits that relate to the consumer, you're going to store them yourselves. That's the amazing part of data fragmentation, which is the core functionality inside of the coin. That is, it's fragmented. It's not on a big blockchain that needs to be lumbered around. We don't need your photos and videos to be lumbered around. You have retention, which means that's the big tick that we have of not worrying about our costs, which we can push more into development. The second area, of course, is, I mentioned in my updates about licensing. It's one thing to sit out there and say, I'm going to spread the word around the planet, but all of a sudden you're hitting barriers and friction with different jurisdictions and different governments. And look at Google. I mean, Google is the subject of a major report from the Australian ACCC, but that doesn't stop it. That hasn't got other reports in 200 odd countries. So all of a sudden, the balance sheet and the P&L reflects that administrative burden in order to meet those compliance issues, which is why I alluded to the significance of the technology we have through Easy Bonds, because the engines and processing capabilities mean that you can push yourself away from that by being compliant and exemptions in relation to those processing of transactions. And there's processing involved. That's what the entire environment is about of moving into taking the good parts of the technology, which is where we're heading with ZUCAS in our strategy. Now, ZUCAS, we've deliberately taken opportunity of COVID. When you're looking at on-location hunting and collecting of all those product lines and the advertising medium, we know it works. It's sensational. And then you combine that with the virtual world that I've talked about in an earlier episode. Suddenly, it's a whole mindset change for the very merchants that we know we can onboard. And I'm going to share some of that with you of those strategies, because if you bring on a merchant at no cost with no upfronts and it's success driven, as I've indicated that we only get paid on success of the redemption or the trading of the vouchers through the consumer at 10%, the 90% is going to the consumer. Now, the ACCC report, at least in Australia, which is reflective of the world program in terms of advertising, shows that there's a less than a 0.08% success rate to the very merchants that are spending these dollars, which is poor, absolutely pathetic. When you think of the billions of dollars globally, $500 billion industry, as to the outcome for the poor bloke that simply wants to sell his goods and services. But he's forced to do that because he thinks that's the only channel. That's the only way in which you can push out your product lines and the way in which you can create that awareness program. And ZuCoins will be taking advantage of that because there's a zero cost based on the channels that we were going to put in play and how the strategies we're releasing as a result of that to get the product ZuCoins kickstarted with the databases that we see. Now, the other big cost, of course, to these major companies in their program is marketing. Now, the marketing dollars can be as high as 80%, 20% rather, of the gross revenues that come in, if they are there, in fact, or projected revenues as an exercise in spending that money. Now, I thought I'd highlight one company that encapsulates the way they have to bring people to their site in order to generate the sales and revenue streams that they make as a result purely from a good platform, but a platform that requires consistent marketing awareness and searching as a result of the products that they're putting out there. Now, that's Airbnb. Now, Airbnb is a wonderful example of why you don't want to go down that road, because there's a limitation in terms of that from a P&L perspective, profit and loss perspective, as to how long you can keep going. Now, the latest stats is extraordinary. If you look at their report since they've gone from the IPO. Now, the IPO is a great document, one of those UBIT documents that we talk about with 500 or 600 pages, and no one cares. And some go to the risk statements, and others don't even bother. They just hope that the thing goes up. And generally, in the last 10 years or so, monkeys have been making more money out of the shares by throwing darts at boards than those analysts that are out there trying to work out what the value propositions are with these companies. If you look at some of the programs, a lot of people are using animals to try and determine the long-term outcomes in relation to some of these shares and what their values will be or may not be, or whether they hit the jackpot if these things go up. But if you go to the core, of Airbnb. Now, this is just my analysis. This is just Alan Enders waking up one day, looking at a structure as to how that can affect the marketing and the advertising strategies we have within our organisation for the benefit of promoting ZuCoins, as one example. ZuCas is a separate scenario. But the IPO, there's a fine print that says at the bottom as a warning before you even open the book to look at Airbnb, and it says they may never make a profit. Well, that's amazing disclosure. But the fact is, they're not about profits. They're about database acquisition, and they cover that with capital that comes in from the IPOs. Now, Airbnb is a $105 billion US company, $105 billion, and may never make a profit. So how do they keep going? They keep going because they keep raising capital, and they keep funding that. And guess what? The percentage of that, a huge chunk of that money goes to. A, it goes to storing the data, which I've just talked about, the hosting costs, and B, advertising. So in order to advertise the very products that generate the revenues, they spent $482 million in advertising in 2020 to the end of 2020. $482 million. Now that's going to the very suppliers that say this is a great idea to push that out into either social media, mainstream advertising, or you've got digital advertising. So there's nothing great or new about the invention of communicating a message to the consumer. But the great thing is that those that are aggregating, and there's a list that you can go through, which basically I've summarized the way in which we analyze and test. You've got Google, Facebook, of course. You've got Twitter, Instagram, lesser extent Telegram. Telegram is more of a testing platform that gives you some intriguing interests, which we wanted to experiment with, which I'll share some secrets there about how that worked really well. And Pinterest. Now, those major corporations are bringing other online businesses like Airbnb to fund their very business lifestyles of revenue streams, which then accumulates and add up into billions. But it's come at a huge cost to Airbnb. Now, Airbnb's never made a profit. Never made a profit. So at the end of 2020, it's had $3.9 billion of US dollar losses, 3.9 billion. And in the first quarter of this to the end for 2021, it's racked up another $1.5 billion of losses. Now, I'm glad that our business is not there worrying about raising money for the need to fund those components, which are all about 1, hosting, 2, marketing, 3, regulatory compliance in the jurisdictions that you operate, because the consumer laws across the world are absolutely staggering. Now, that's the beauty of where we say, focusing back, that we've got a platform that solves those 3 issues. That means we've got far more firepower and reserves in terms of what do we want to do? We want people to accept the product, which is in this instance the ZuCoins. And once that's unleashed, Everybody on the planet can do their own advertising campaigns with ZuCoins. As I said, it's a decentralized product that allows others to take advantage of that. ZuCas just happens to be one format that has a model that'll bring together the use of the coins for the purposes to again save costs back to the merchant. If you save the merchant costs, the consumer gets the benefit. Because at the end of the day, all of these processes is taking money from the very pockets of consumers in terms of the goods and services they're buying. And that's the essence of the ACCC report. Now, you then start to say, if you bring that together, well, what experience have we had in terms of testing the markets and the advertising that we want to roll out? Well, I'll tell you, we've had 20 years of pretty good experience in that regard, and we're going to bring that to the fore to treat the ZuCoin brand the way in which we want to deliver that, and we can do that on the basis through the ZuCas platform. Now, the first thing is, let's talk about let's just summarize, I guess, the thought concepts of what's come out of the ACCC report. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to share firstly in relation to that. Now, this is just to the Australian market, okay? Just the Australian market. Now, in 2020, there's about $10 billion that's gone into advertising. All right. Now, of those $10 billion, you've got search and directories. So the glory of looking for something, that is, we all sit there and we go through, in this instance, they're talking particular reference to Google, but to go looking for something, looking for a pair of shoes, you're paying a price for that. Because at the end of the day, your very data is being chewed up and used and spat out the other end and comes back with another ad of which the merchants are paying for that, which goes into the cost of the goods and services. It's a round robin. But of that, $2 billion of revenue comes from search engines. Now, these are not my numbers. These are the ACCC's numbers. General display, putting up a display. I mean, how wonderful. I mean, you go into the social media platforms and people hate them. Oh, this is a paid ad. There's companies in there that have withdrawn their promotional material from social media because it's just a mess. I mean, the commentaries that come out in relation to it have far more damaging impact in the shorter term on product brands than worrying about the good comments. People are far more interested in promoting the negatives by a factor of 10 to 1 than they are in giving you a rap in the good ones. How do we know that? Well, we've known that for centuries. Bad reporting is always getting attraction. If you're at home and baking a cake and having a good time with your cup of tea, is that newsworthy? Now, it depends on whether the cup of tea falls on your head and ends up as a bit of a funny skit, and all of a sudden there's millions of people looking at it because there's a detrimental effect that this has happened. So the positives out of that are far less than what the social media content promotes and pushes. But the display ads can be affected by that. Now, how do I know that? Because the success on these channels is 0.08%. So 0.08% of all these dollars, $500 billion, is actually giving the merchants the benefit. Now, merchants don't necessarily just mean those with goods that you normally see. You're looking for clothes and hats and glasses or whatever it is. It's also the service industry, because people are promoting legal products. They're promoting the services they provide for accounting services, all sorts of services. People just want the message out there that, hey, I'm here. I'm here with a service. Come to my site. Come to my website. Come and share with me the products that I'm going to share with you. And I can do discounts. Now, once the ads have gone out, that's only the start of it, because then the poor old merchant says, well, I've got you there, 0.08%, but then he's still got to give you discounts because you may not wish to continue with that product. Now, Airbnb and the major companies in relation to the tourism industry or the hotels and things, they've been giving out discounts for years, but they pay a double whammy. They pay Trivago, they pay Expedia, because, people are too lazy to look up the actual hotel chain itself directly, where they're located, and they go and see if they've got these aggregators that have created this perception of this is the whole list of every hotel in the world, and these are the benefits. And it's because it makes it easy for us. But you're still paying for it because they're going to build those prices into those goods and services if the merchant can't come direct to you. Now, in terms of classified ads are a 2 billion spend. And I want to talk about Main Street and how you capture that market as well. Because at the end of the day, you're paying for it, and you're paying for it whether you believe it or not, or indirectly or otherwise. Now, the percentages in terms of the ACCC report, you've got 16% of that relates to classified ads, 39% relates to display ads, and 45% are search engines. So you can see that the accumulation of that data and the way in which that's promoted puts a lot of pressure on the small merchants. And if we're in the same boat as coming forward in trying to globalize the ZuCoin product, we'd have no choice because we'd be looking for hundreds of millions of dollars in order to spend just to get the attention seeking. That doesn't necessarily mean anybody buys a coin, by the way. That just means you know about it. And then, of course, in kicks the 10-to-1 ratio of Wally comments, and suddenly you're on the back foot because you're trying to worry about the protection of your brand. Now, we've never worried about that because the strategy we have has been a reverse thinking strategy for 12 months in preparation for this. Now, how do I know that? Because look at PayPal. PayPal is out there, but you can go and search PayPal sucks. And there's millions of people that says PayPal sucks. Now, either you disregard that and get on with your business, or you look at the way in which you take advantage of that. Now, PayPal's a major player, and therefore it's got the billions behind it, and it says, well, who cares? There's that strategy that says just disregard. There's no point wasting time and resources on addressing those issues. Now, certainly they extract some of those issues because they've got to make sure that their systems and software is in place. And that's the key, to filter your way through those that effectively are false positives, and I'll talk about that strategy, in order to improve your own products. But the others is all just chatter. I wanted to then look at the market of where we're heading, because what happens is, of those dollars that are coming in and the advertising that's being in play, there's a big shift in the technology where that's coming from and going to, and that is 65% is all mobile phone usage. So that's a big ringing endorsement of people with the shift away from your PC, laptops, etc. Now, still there, no doubt, 35% is a big chunk of money, but the more and more usage and the more streamlining through apps and the way in which that's been put in play is a great endorsement of why you want the flexibility of what we've put in place, which is progressive web apps, and the focus point being phone to phone. And that's why you have the merchants that we built in ZuCas, the ability to communicate directly through that portal for obvious reasons, because that's where the market is. And that's where the benefits will go direct between merchant and consumer, not to a third party that sits in the middle. The other interesting stat which caught my eye, which is on page 46 of the ACCC report, was the content or the nature of the content that's really encapsulating a greater share of that revenue market. And that turns out to be videos. So in 2020, 58% of the displays that were coming through for advertising purposes was videos. Now, that's a very key, exciting area for us in ZuCas, because when you look at the hunting either virtually from a consumer point of view, or you're looking at the on-location hunting, we're on the money, where the augmented reality and the capacity to have live streaming and the capacity direct from the merchant is an absolute winner. And it gives the merchant that firepower. Now, the beautiful thing is that on the one hand, the consumer can be selective through his favorites or through blocks or whatever he wants to do. On the other hand, you're creating little portals of engagement directly between merchant and consumer. So the merchant can suddenly block out all of that bad chatter that we've talked about. They don't need to sit there and worry about all the commentaries that are coming through, because you've just got idiots out there. I mean, you've just got absolute idiots that want to waste everybody's time, and yet these are characters because they want to still enjoy the technology, and away they go. But it's a line that is, in the current advertising marketing environment, causes a drain on the businesses. And we've seen that with the merchants that we deal with that say, look, we want portals that are going to block or remove that. How do you go about that? And just focus on those consumers that are dead set serious about what they want to buy or sell. And that's the purpose of what we've been testing and creating with ZuCas. Now, why do I say that that's the evolution of a change in thinking and the shift of the merchants in the way they're communicating and not wanting that clutter? It came to the fore recently, uh, which no one's going to bother reading it, but certainly for pure entertainment, it's of great interest to me because it reaffirms the strategies that we've said and suggested, not for just ZuCoins, but for ZuCas and our merchants. And that was a High Court case recently. Now, that High Court case is, just for the reference, for those that are interested, but Australian News Channel versus Dylan Voller, 2021. It's only recent, HCA 27. Now, this has had a fundamental shift in the thinking of what merchants are looking for. And they could be broadcasters as well, because what happened in this instance was you have parties, like in this case, a major news broadcast channel, which could be ZuCas, it could be ZuCoins, it could be the hairdressing shop, it could be anybody on the planet that's a business promoting. And unfortunately, they're funneled into a major platform. And in this case, it was platforms like Facebook and Google and so on, because that seems to be the only way you can advertise to get the message out, as I've described. Now, the courts come back and said that because in that instance, the news channels were using those platforms, which we all, that's the norm. And because there was negative commentary coming through from, some absolute idiots, it's always been thought that either you try and remove the idiots, you have blocking mechanisms and so on, or you attack the idiots and, they jump up and down about defamation. And, being the litigant that I am, I'm very intrigued in this space as to where that potential liability can reside. And that's why, I've had the team deliberately set up some of our social media. And that's been an amazing, wonderful exercise, particularly Telegram, because as we talked about that before, that platform promotes itself on being anonymous in different jurisdictions. And of course, they try and remove themselves from that defamation type platform issues by having all these, wombats promoting and pushing negative commentary across the board. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be quite abusive. It can be quite offensive. It's of no relevance. It's just there to pure entertainment, really, in any sense. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'll talk about why we see that as a good thing in the longer term. But certainly those platforms, the High Court says, well, and Dylan Voller, who had that sort of negative commentary, ended up going all the way through to the High Court. And credit to him, sensational, had the win, and basically said that the platforms themselves were responsible. Now, that's a real interesting twist, because if the platforms don't clean up their act and get rid of this garbage, they're going to be held now responsible for the damage as a consequence to be paid out. And that's what happened. Now, that's an exciting development. And there's starting to be more legislation that's put in play. I mean, already you have all sorts of those that want to go down the road of commentary. There's criminal offences in relation to that sort of stuff. But the journey of that takes a long time, whereas this is an exciting High Court development. Now, why is it so exciting? Well, look at the reaction in the last week or so. CNN, which is just a broadcaster of international news, has completely withdrawn its entire broadcasting components off Facebook. Now, think about that. There's a powerhouse broadcaster which pushes massive revenues by its broadcasts and attraction of consumers through to Facebook, which generates that revenue, which sends it out to everybody on Facebook just for the hell of it. People click and get page impressions and millions of hits and all the rest of it. Facebook banks the money. CNN's paying for that luxury. But Facebook refused to have a complete block of all the commentaries in relation to CNN. Now, their suggestion was, well, why don't you just block it as it goes, one at a time? Now, the reason that they can't do that because it's an administrative burden, which is the reason why over the last 6 months, and I'll share some inner real secrets here, I wanted to make sure we tested those formats through the various channels before we are ready to bring into play ZuCas that removes that nonsense, doesn't give the opportunity, and also pushes back into the hands of the merchant the firepower of their hard-earned dollars that doesn't affect them until they have a successful sale at only 10%, of which we end up sharing that 10%, by the way, because we have concepts in play that reward the merchant, which is part of this ZuCoin strategy. So if CNN is the beginning of removing themselves, because CNN can end up being held accountable under the High Court provision, even though Facebook's got the platform. So suddenly you're dragging a number of parties into this mess because they can't turn off the idiots. So that's where we sit in terms of the strategies that we want and what we know we can do, which I'm now going to share. So the message is a number of layers of why we roll the ZuCoin out. Now, the first and easiest part is the relationship with our merchant. Now, there's a lot of merchants out there on a global scale that already have loyalty database programs. And they're trying to connect that and still, you're bombarding people with emails. It's amazing the amount of people that unsubscribe, don't want to see things. But you're really trying to zone in on the core loyalty of the database that you have. Now, the merchants that we deal with, and I'm going to use an example of testing that we did, which was with West Tigers Footy Club in the NRL. Now, you've got about 18,000 members, and the relationship with West will lead into next year when we're ready, when we are ready with our programs after the rebuilds that we've been doing to promote the club. Now, the club has an expenditure that every dollar counts when you're looking at NRL. Money comes in from the members, and of course, they've got their budgets. But the priority for the club is the players. So there's a lot of money spent at the higher end of their budgets on players. And where they can save is in advertising. That's where ZuCas comes along, because it says to them, we'll put up the programs with all of your sponsors. So all of the sponsors that are paying big dollars will get a free kick by advertising. And we tested this at the games where we had 18,000 supporters. And what you do is you drop the vouchers, augmented reality in whatever forms they were, around the grounds for people to hunt and collect. Now, those vouchers are from all of the sponsors. There's no cost at all to any of the main supporters and sponsors of the club. It's only on redemption that there's a fee, which means it's been successful, 100% successful. But more importantly, the merchants and the club get to see the analytics of the take-up, what part of the ground, what part of Sydney. Now, that's only 18,000. But when you tease that out, that database is actually in effect about 250,000 people, because that database includes the relationships they have in time for next year, things like the leagues clubs. So suddenly you're dropping vouchers for $10, $15, $20 beers and things, or restaurant meals, even with COVID. It doesn't matter, because in lockdown you can provide promotional material. That is, these are the shirts and the pants and the hats and all the rest of it that you can get order online, and you're going to get the money that would have been spent on advertising direct to the consumer as a value. So in those testings and that environment, that's where we secure database acquisition and a marketplace at effectively zero cost, because we are encouraging the merchants through the new technology to onboard what they already have. Now, 250,000 people, that's just one of the smaller ones. in terms of the merchant dealings that we know and have had in place and will continue to roll out, particularly in the areas where we've got merchants across the board with online businesses. Now let's talk about that, because it's another key plank in the way in which ZuCoins will be rolled out around the world if you look at that model. Now, if you're an online business, you can go anywhere in the world with Zukaz. And the beautiful thing is you can pick your target markets. You can go to different countries in Europe. You can drop the vouchers. You can see the reaction. You can see whether they're collected or hunted or gone directly through the virtual world. You can sit in America. You can sit in other countries. It doesn't matter. The point is there's zero cost, unlike what you're seeing in the ACCC report, $10 billion in the Australian market, which is huge. That money doesn't need to be spent up front, doesn't need to be sitting there like Airbnb worrying about $424 million a year on marketing. They don't need to spend a cent. What they can do is put that $424 million into discounts at Airbnb properties and assist that market, give them direct to the people that take up those properties. And of course, there's a sale. Now, that sale could come through a success, which is revenue shared back to Airbnb. It's not going to the aggregators that they think they need you to see the logo of Airbnb in a market. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. So from a dropping point, the strategy we've got is that with the organic acquisition of database, and I've just used one example, and we're very comfortable with the databases that we know with our merchants are in the millions, that we'll be pushing through and releasing through our product lines through Zukaz, are there. I don't need to spend any money with any of the social media networks. We don't need to spend a dime, not a single cent. We don't need to raise capital. We don't need to worry about the hosting because the very data is with the peers. We're very comfortable with our business model. What we want to do is enhance the user experience through the forms of the augmented reality and the geo mapping, which is a leading way to move forward. Now, that's just the ability. If you can imagine then, ZuCoins is treated as a separate client, which it is, and it decides to drop the proposition of coins around the world. Now, those coins may be as simple as marketing tools where you have, airdrops today with coins, but, totally, as far as I'm concerned, there's only a handful of crypto that's of any value, because there's some value proposition there, but certainly all the others are duds. They don't have any end user case. In this instance, the incentive is for the merchant to accept the coins as part of that sale process and the transaction. And of course, that leads into the third part of our P&L. We don't have the onerous problems as most companies would do if you need to have those transfer of value through the remittance world. In licensing, you don't need to have 53 states in America on board at $50 million a year to meet those requirements and obligations. Why? Because we've been down that road and we know the road we need to be on. As long as we stick to the pure transfer of consumer to merchant, that's it. And we get paid for the success of that. And that's where the ZuCoins fit in, because we can globally attack the market to promote and push ZuCoins that may have some end value for the people that end up picking those ZuCoins up. And as I said in my earlier programs, it's an amazing thing that if you incentivize the merchant, you give a little bit away, that they're going to be rewarded with some fractions of coins, which is in our treasury, or the consumer is going to be rewarded with some fractions of coins for redeeming and trading, then the incentives are in place. What's going to be exciting is to see the analytics from around the world as to what areas are focused and the demographics that I've talked about, the unbanked through countries that don't have the opportunities that we've had, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in South America, because that's where there's only one thing they require, and that's a mobile phone, which on these statistics is exactly what we've been plotting and planning. From this report now is confirmed that that's the push in the market, that people are reliant upon their phone big time, whether it's your Android or iPhone. Now, they then say, well, how do you do some mainstream marketing, which is our tactics on what we do? Well, that was very simple. We've experimented with, we don't want to be like these Airbnb and write out a check for $484 million and splatter it everywhere and hopefully, hits its target and someone wakes up one morning and says, I'm aware of Airbnb. There's no point making $1.5 billion losses a quarter. There's no point raising capital to cover the losses and get excited and say I'm a 105, start again, $105 billion capped value company for the sake of just saying that. Now, sure, some people are going to make a killing on that and some people get excited, but there's no long-term prospects in that, which is admitted in the IPO of Airbnb in itself. We don't expect ever to make a profit. You can't keep going if you don't have some dollars in the tin. So from our perspective, we'd say, let's look at a strategy that goes beyond the merchant relationship and the organic growth and data acquisition through that loyalty of the merchant and his consumers. And let's start to tease out the way in which we can put in play the valuable dollars and preserve those dollars and get those dollars back. So years ago, people talk about the sponsorships that we did, and they were all tested sponsorships. We did the Western Bulldogs in 2006 and 7. Now, let's clarify that issue. That was $1 million in cold hard cash that went in the sponsorship, but there was a kicker in the sponsorship. That was actually money paid to the Bulldogs. Now, that money, in terms of where it went, was into the business of the Western Bulldogs for promotional material, which Easy Bonds was one of the sponsors. But the kicker was that if we introduced our product lines, then the revenue share that we gave, which is 30% of every dollar that the Bulldogs would have earned, the first $1 million comes back to the business. So as far as we're aware, it's the only sponsorship concept ever where you get the benefit of mainstream media sponsorship type program. And you can actually quantify the value of that, because if the Bulldogs spread that amongst their 30,000 members, our products, and make money, the first $1 million comes back. So there's a time delay essence in terms of the way in which that comes in and out. Now, sure, the media will report there was $300,000 still owing. And that's still owing because that was the continuation we wanted in 2008 that we were unable to follow through. And there's a whole raft of reasons for that because of the time in relation to the court cases of the government. But nevertheless, that's one of the revisited programs that 300,000 will be put back in play, back to the Western Bulldogs as a surprise. And we would look forward to continuing those sort of strategies with other clubs, hence the West Tigers, for example. And we have other clubs that want to go down this road, more so now than ever because of the ZUCAS formula and the value of that advertising medium globally, which means that if you think about the database and you think about West Tigers coming on board, or any football club or any racing association or any of those groups that have loyalty databases, then of course the wonderful thing is that when they on board and those customers are linked to that organisation, if I'm a member of the West Tigers and I go hunting and collecting other products, there's a revenue share based on those other products back to West Tigers. It's not just what happens within the West Tigers world. And of course, as a consumer, we're going to do a lot of other things. You're going to have other merchant products and we share that back. That's why the loyalty component and the revenues are divvied up amongst the participants. The consumers still get a reward out of this, because if you've got a voucher and it's worth $100 face value to a merchant, might be for electrical goods, and you can't use that voucher, you've got the opportunity of selling that voucher up to the face value so you can make money. So a business model will never be challenged in terms of where the current aggregators of data sit, because they're too far gone. They just need to get dollars in the door. They need to show there's massive page impressions. They need to show they're pushing it out through the mediums, which is disclosed in the ACCC report, which creates these monopolies. I mean, the last item in terms of that, by the way, is that 80% of that total market effectively is all surrounding the product lines through Google. Why? Because they've got a search engine, because people are lazy and can't find things. Now, to their credit, that's what they built, that's what they created, but they have to maintain that domination through all of those three line items that I've indicated in order to search. The entire internet is cached. Get your head on that. There's a business that every bit of material, digital data, is stored somewhere and cached 24/7 in order to keep it updated. I mean, the logic of that is extraordinary. It's absurd in a way, but nevertheless, that's to provide that to you so they make money. But the loser is the merchant, because he's not getting the success rate on the dollars he's spending. And you can see that through Airbnb. So the strategy of the second point being sponsorship, our dollar is precious and we want that return based on our own success. That model is going to be around for a long, long time, that if we need to sponsor and put some dollars in for mainstream street advertising, then we know that we've got the opportunity of getting it back if we deliver through the relationship with that merchant, that sporting body, whatever. And we've tested this with local sporting clubs, smaller clubs around the country. It works fantastic. So that's how you get the coins out. That's how you get the word out that suddenly there is a brand sponsor that's creating that media hype and attention through Main Street media, TV, newspapers, etc. More older generational stuff. The third point is ZuCas itself in terms of gamification. Now, in Albury-Wodonga, we deliberately did a strategy of testing the strategy of a gamification through the giveaway of a vehicle. Now, we had the sponsors come in with the vehicle. We had a discounted price on that vehicle, and we treated that as our advertising to see the type of response that we would get as a result of that car being given away with some trips to Disney, which then brought in other merchants as part of that plan. Now, that was a phenomenal success. It onboarded the 10,000 odd consumers that were hunting and collecting, and the car and the trip to Disney was broken down into bits, so that when you went around hunting and collecting, you needed to collect the various components of the vehicle, augmented reality. And if you brought that together and you found the key to the car, you were the lucky winner of the vehicle. Or in that instance, to Walt Disney, a trip for two to go to Walt Disney, fully paid and funded as a result of the gamification of that. Now, we know that works 100%. We knew that worked at a winery. We had 250 participants hunting and collecting, at a winery in relation to the very winery products where they were giving the discounts as well. In other words, the cash vouchers. So the human mindset is, let's get something of value, but let's get that value from the merchant, who then knows he's going to get a sale. That's the key. That is the key part of your marketing strategy, and that's the key with the ZuCoins. Those entities and businesses I talk about directly affect the way we would market and promote through gamification the ZuCoins. Now, you're not going to see that around the world because no one's got the ZuCas platform. We've got the platform. We know what that platform can deliver. And we did it in Geelong as our test. Now, the next phase of our testing was then, let's look at the proposition of the social media channels. It's always intrigued me. So when you go back and you research, as I said, you've got a factor of 10 to 1 based on idiots. But those idiots are important because they can deliver some of the material you need as to your business and the brand protections, even though this high court case is going to cause a lot of grief to the idiots because people are going to be switching off the platform commentaries. It's important to recognise that you need to understand their thinking to improve where you're going to be. Now, social media. I went out deliberately of the blocks to test Twitter. Now, one of the things and lessons is controversy creates more interest in the media campaign than, as I said earlier, than filming yourself having a cup of coffee with a biscuit. Now, that may be entertaining for 3 people, but you're not going to get 1 million viewers. Pouring a cup on your head might pull you up with about 20,000 and go from there. But this is where the idiot factor comes in, and criticizing businesses and criticizing their brands and putting up things about it's a scam or whatever else it may be. PayPal sucks. I mean, all that sort of stuff. You've got to look at that and take advantage of that, which is what's called, this goes back to some theses that were back in 1928. So, we think we're really clever in our advertising space, but creating false positives and false negatives as a result of that. And you look at the proposition is, what can you get those social media value propositions up in terms of your attention to drag you into Main Street media? Well, with the Twitter accounts, which, as you know, I'm no longer with it because we finished our program on what I wanted to achieve with that. That's why there's so much controversy I was quite happy to explore. So the more things that were said about me and the more negatives or the business or brands, the better it got, because they don't realize they increase the traction. And you've got an answer to that. You have an answer to the negatives that have been put out. Now, the problem with Twitter, of course, is the only winner is Twitter, because by the time they start taking that data in from both the idiots and those that are trying to promote themselves, or those that want to go down this influencer road, the real winners turn out long term is to be Twitter because of the advertising. So we're not going to waste our time and money on platforms that don't achieve an outcome that we want in terms of money going to the merchant. It's a pretty simple set of numbers, which is why we talk about with our social media. We then experiment with Facebook. Here we are. We then talk about the lack of success in Facebook, 0.08%. There's no point of that. It's just a message portal to send you this updates of what we're doing and the secrets behind our marketing strategy. There's no point Instagram. There's no point Telegram. I mean, Telegram's, one of those channels that's just full of chatter, and that's where I was able to experiment with the false positives. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when you look at some of the artificial intelligence programs, and Microsoft are leading this way, what we've been reviewing for some months now is the way you change the message that you want. Now, if you get the opportunity, have a look at the Telegram guys. They come out with all their waffle. And the system allows, through artificial intelligence, to extract certain words and components of those words and put them into a positive light and re-engineer that so that the message goes out, even if it's under a negative header. So you could have Alan Endres is a scam. But underneath that is all about the contrary argument as to the good things that are happening in relation to the company, the product, the person, whatever you want. Now, it's nothing new that I've invented. This has been looked at and considered by the giants in the industry, who have to understand that you're never going to have 100% of the population that likes you. I couldn't give a stuff if people don't like me. Water off a duck's back. We have our motivation. I have my studies in terms of Art of War of Sun Tzu, and of course, agitate, irritate. Now, the funny thing about the Twitter is that then starts to transition into the media that you get the free advertising from. If you think of Bitcoin. In 2009, that wonderful month of January, it starts out as a joke. We don't even know who's behind it. We've got a couple of Wally names. Satoshi could have been called bananas for all intents and purposes. And people don't believe it. It's a scam. It's this, it's that. But then there's a realization. Well, hang on. Maybe this is not a bad thing. This blockchain thing could actually work. And suddenly there's a value in it. Suddenly there's arguments and reasons put up as to maybe I should buy some. And all of a sudden, mainstream picks it up. The media starts to talk about it because it goes from 10 cents to $500. It goes from $500 to 10,000. It drops back to 3,000. Now, even when it drops back and there's a negative report, Bitcoin is going to collapse. Guess what? That's the best media you could ever have, because everybody's looking at Bitcoin again. Wow, China's turned it off. Oh, my goodness. Guess what? Fantastic media. It's across every major mainstream media outlet in the world. What's there? Bitcoin. So the wallies out there that think there's a negative profile are actually helping and assisting in the very attention they're bringing to things as a result of what's happened. It's a wonderful experiment in marketing strategies. Now, eventually, there's some kudos that gets picked up by the regulators, authorities, and they start to sit back and say, well, it's not quite illegal. Bitcoin is fine. We don't like it, but we'll try and regulate it. Now, the very fact that you want to regulate something is giving credibility to the very product that you said was a joke in the first place. That's wonderful advertising. The regulators are actually putting and promoting free to all those in BTC and Ethereum and everything else in crypto by their very actions. I mean, the fact that the central banks, which was in my episode, let's look at that, 12, the fact that central banks are coming out with central bank digital currencies is a ringing endorsement. They've actually picked up and they've taken the advertising to another level because it's now going to be considered a view in those that were never even contemplating going near it. Hedge funds, investment funds, super funds, companies that are setting up EFTs, all these sort of product lines in terms of the product itself. So you've got to grab that opportunity with the negatives that come through and embrace it, which is what we're doing and why we tested this false positive theories and technology in relation to how do you convert that commentary into positives. Now, the good news is Microsoft hasn't been sitting idle. Artificial intelligence is going to automate that process. And the APIs that we have and looking through will be one of the engines that drives that to give the merchant and the consumer the best possible relationship. Now, you know you're going to have negatives on your product. If this thing doesn't work, then you'd say it doesn't work. And you put out there that there's a compelling reason for it. If the dishwasher doesn't work, the consumer laws say you take it back. There's nothing bad about that. But when you get the commentary that goes to another level, and it talks about the CEO of the makers of the dishwashing machine and his life, and there's all this sort of abuse and things that happen, that's the stuff you just can churn out and cut out. And you can do that with what's coming with some of this new AI intelligence, artificial intelligence technology on converting all that stuff into positive stuff and pushing them out. Now, data fragmentation, I can't press this enough, lends itself to where we're developing now things like ZuChat that allows the true content to be residing with peers, the true chats, the true videos, your pictures that you can make money on. You don't need a third party to handle that for you, Google and all the rest of them. You've got the ability to communicate directly that messages with the merchants, and the merchants can reward you for that very data that you may be participating in by receiving the vouchers they want you to share and buy their products. Now, that means you can isolate the dimwits. It's quite simple. Now, if you're still not happy with that, then of course, this new false positive, false negative strategies is going to be a game changer. Now, why do you want that? Because you don't want to go to court simply because you're pushing out your platforms and the High Court now says you're gone because they can have all that commentary, and then there's someone that's affected by that, some third party, some innocent commentary of some innocent person, got nothing to do with the products or lines, which is what happened with Dylan Voller. And they're in a position that you don't want that litigation. You just want to get on with business. So the social media, from where we sit, what we're now moving into, and this is getting a little bit long now, but certainly it's on public file. The strategy moving forward for ZuCoins with our marketing, obviously, tick the box. ZooCaz is going to be crucial for that global reveal. The way in which we gamify that, we gamify the drops, the way in which we relationship with our merchants, our onboarding of merchants, the way in which we don't need big dollars to be spent because that's the whole purpose of ZooCaz and that connection with consumers. We don't need to be making monthly losses or quarterly losses as a result of hosting costs and licensings and all the rest of it. That's all part of the big picture. But more importantly, it allows us to grow and build a complete independent portal for that very messaging outside of even the drops of ZooCaz. in connection with artificial intelligence that it makes that happen in a positive way. And we'll be revealing with our relationships with our US partners as to how that portal is going to work. And that portal means we don't need social media. Now, we're not far away. We've finished our testing on a number of the platforms where we'll be turning off all our social media for that reason, because you'll be directed through these new portals that gives you the opportunity to have portals within portals. Let's take an example. Now, some of these things that we've tested, we've had people that get excited about, I found a secret document on Easy Bonds or for example, the Zangle report. Well, we knew we were going to release all those reports. But when you go into the new portals that we've been working through, and we're going to build as our social media component of ZuCas, and you see that, you only want certain people like merchants. You might have specific merchant contracts that the merchants are privy to. You don't want all the idiots running around in relation to those contracts. Now, the way to solve that, of course, is that with this portal programs and marketing strategies, without the social media effect and everything else, we can split crypt them. Now, we'll be releasing the splitlock.com material not too far away to show the firepower of how that works. We've had it working for 5 years. And what's going to happen is we're going to give it in a dumbed down version in a small PDF. And we're going to let that PDF be split crypted. In other words, it's busted up in a million bits and there's two parts. And you'll see one part which looks like a packet of Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the other part will be there as well. And unless you've got the ability with the cryptographic hash keys to bring it together, that's what you're going to continue to see. And that's the sort of material we can place in these portals that only the merchants with that connection to that cryptographic hash key can actually open the thing and put it back, reconstitute it, that document. And in fact, we're so excited about that we're looking at with the release of the Zoo coins and get past the wallets, get to the exchange, marketing globally. As part of that global marketing, we're going to put that product out to test it against the hackers. And we're going to readily invite them to have a crack. There it is. There's the split crypted document. Give us a call when you can tell us what it says, because you won't put it together. You don't need encryption. And that's the key plank as part of where the evolution came from with split chain. But more importantly, when you're in our portals, if you've got private material, your private videos, you've got private pictures and things, you'll be able to split crypt them. You'll be able to store a bit on your phone and a bit with Amazon, a bit with Microsoft, whoever it is. But guess what? They won't be able to see anything either, because they've got the other half. You can store it anywhere in the world. Put it on a USB, put it in the drawer, throw it in the bin, whatever you like. The technology is absolutely phenomenal, which again is part of the marketing plan of why are Zoo coins so important in the way in which the evolution of blockchain has happened. And that's the messages that we can put out. That's the drops that we can do. That's exactly what we can do with augmented reality in terms of pushing that message out. Now, I'll just close on the strategies that I know have worked sensational, aside from the false positive stuff, which I'm delighted with. But certainly, let's talk about how do you tease and take a single focal point and expand that through main media and expand that to the internet in fairly rapid growth and test that. Now, the success that I know worked well was alligator blood. Now, there's not a horse that's out there that has such a high profile. He's a cult figure. Why? Because we deliberately set out to test the controversies and see what the market response was. That's what I do. The controversy kick-started what is an alligator blood. Now, this horse, he's won one Group 1. He's won $1.8 million in prize money. He's had 10 wins. And we've got over 135,000 followers directly. Why? And all from around the world, from Mauritius, from Fiji, from the United States, Lexington, UK, France, because they're interested in what the horse is doing. They're interested in the controversy. Now, the marketing coup of that is that when he got disqualified, most people would go away and sulk. Oh no, we've lost 1.2 million. There was a drug issue, and it's a problem, and you're discredited and tarnished and all the rest of it. Now, there's a certain element to that in terms of the horse didn't know he was on drugs. None of the owners knew he was on drugs, and the drug was called Altrenergist, which is a fertility drug. Now, that made an absolute mockery. It's a non-performance enhancing drug in relation to the fertility of mares and fillies. Now, the last time I saw, Al had balls. He's a gelding, but he's not a filly. He's certainly not a mare. Which was the amazing humour that was in the entire process. Now, we had meetings on it. I had meetings with my teams and decided that let's press the buttons and use that controversy to our advantage for marketing. Because guess what? People are interested in calling everybody else under the sun crooks, etc., and being involved in relation to the horse. Well, the outcome of that was the steward's report clearly stipulated that the fault rested with the trainer. He was fined $20,000 and nobody knows nothing. But when we review the law and people say, Alan, you're crazy on that, because he's got such a cult following, because we've proven we've increased our database by that magnitude, and because we've now got followers that are interested in what else we do, and because we've got mainstream reporting, you can look up alligator blood and he comes across every major newspaper in the country. And it's not over yet. Why? Because, again, marketing and research is what I do. And I looked at the drug issue, and every single case, since the laws were changed or the rules in 2002, all hone in on the reality of focusing and challenging the drug. Now, in my legal research, I found a book in 1968 that talked about Dancer's Image, the Kentucky Derby winner who lost the Kentucky Derby because of Butte. Now, the regret in that book was the owner said he regretted not tackling the law in relation to natural justice principles. That is, the owner had no rights whatsoever other than the unfettered reasoning or discretion by the powers to be to disqualify the horse. Now, it's actually worse than that here because we had nothing to do with protecting either the image of the horse or protecting the overturning the disqualification because we weren't involved in any inquiries. So I launched the challenge that's been before the Supreme Court and waiting a decision. And it's pretty basic. You can't just take away something from someone if there's no natural justice principles and expect that you can automatically disqualify someone and lose their assets and rights. And those rights are significant. I mean, we had an offer for Al for $3.2 million and knocked it back. We love the horse and continue to love him. And he'll come back. He'll win some Group 1 races. As much as you think that won't happen, it will happen. The horse is in incredible shape. And he's making himself a reappearance now in the Magic Millions in January. But what am I saying this for? Publicity, marketing. You know, most people would be concerned and worried about their lives if someone came up and said to you and put it in the major newspapers, you're an arsehole, or you're a scammer, or you're a crook, or a drug lord. I mean, they're wonderful, wonderful things in terms of the controversy that you can then share the experiences. And you're always going to get two sets of people, those that believe and those that don't. Well, forget the non-believers because they're the losers on the planet. They're going nowhere. Those that embrace, and there you turn it round, that's why we have the followings we do with alligator blood. Now, that marketing will be sensational because, why do I say that? Because it's an intro that has been with the way in which the horse around the world has had attention. We've got people that are very significantly wealthy people that are in the horsing industry that are now looking at ZuCoins and looking at their businesses and how now they can take advantage of that. I mean, the racing industry is one of the greatest levelers on the planet. You can be a billionaire or you can have 20 cents in your pocket and still be on the same part of the racetrack as anybody else and participate in that industry. And the industry for us is huge when you think of ZuCoins. I mean, the betting industry is a bit of a cleanser, really. because at least you know you're either going to win or blow it up your ass. When you have all these other things happening, like investments and shares and things, all the experts are out there and telling you this and telling you that. At the end of the day, you can still have a company go down the toilet. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute advice. I don't follow through with that with shares or anything like that. I just have the blood up your ass principle. There's a risk, you invest, you take it, you move on, and you put yourself in the position of where we see in the crypto space that there's two sets of technology. There's Bitcoin, there's ZuCoin. We know what we have with ZuCoin. We know where it's going. It's about viral. It's about spreading the message. And we know with Zukaz and that strategies that we've talked about will allow us to push hard to get the uptake of people, which comes back to MV equals PT. You increase the demand, the volume, the circulation, and you can dream up whatever you see as a value yourself in relation to that for the crypto, in this instance, ZuCoins. That's the delivery. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long one again, but you don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can tune in and tune out and come back. Do not worry about the way we see things in terms of the global marketing. Every single thing that you see and things that we do have a reason behind them. They're well thought out. They've been well thought out for many years. And as I said, leave you with this thought. Art of War by Sun Tzu, those principles apply as much to the litigation that I've adopted, where one of the key planks in that, for example, was agitate and irritate, have a withdrawal, when equally matched, fight. And that's the position I'm in with the government. I've been agitating, irritating for 22 years until I'm ready to pounce. And do the same with advertising and marketing. You create that profiles and you embrace all of what is put in front of you, good, bad, or otherwise, and turn it to your advantage. And that advantage is coming because the portals that you will see, which is the freedom of the peers in terms of the data and the freedom of the advertising and the way in which we will promote and push that freedom with the protection of the split lock and split chain technologies, is going to be a whole new dimension in the thinking of social media. Because the days of wallies and idiots having a great time is closing. It's coming to an end because their value is deteriorating in terms of the profitability that these companies need to store that crap just for the sake of trying to generate interest from the genuine participants wanting value propositions of advertising and products. That's the key. That's where we're heading. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'm Alan Endres, founder of ZuCoins and ZuCaz. Sit tight, be kind, be ZuKind, and by all means, it's ZuTime. Thanks for your company.